Welcome to the Managing Partners Forum North America. I'm Larry Stroud. The forum's latest webinar today is entitled Succession in Professional Services Firms, Challenges of Implementing During a Pandemic. Our audience today is from across Canada and the US, in addition to a number of people internationally. As part of today's session, we are going to have a poll with instant results. The poll will comprise 6 questions, and we will conduct the poll at different stages during the webinar. We've lined up an excellent panel today. Joining the panel are Harry Blum. Harry is the National Managing Partner of RSM Canada, a public accounting services firm and the Canadian member firm of RSM International, the global network of independent audit, tax, accounting firms with more than 48,000 people in 120 countries. Harry sets vision and direction for the firm nationally and internationally, spearheads its expansion and acquisition strategies, service line and business development, and is charged with overseeing the firm's profitability. Harry is a CPA CA. Our second panel member is Manuelle Charbonneau. Manuelle is a French-American advisor to C-suite senior leaders and teams. Manuelle is based in Los Angeles and is the founder of Charbonneau Leadership Consulting. She consults and coaches on accelerating leadership transitions and succession in professional services firm from Big Four to AMLA 200, both in US and internationally. Our third panel member is Andy Corot. Andy is the managing partner of Murtha Cullina, a 120 attorney firm across 5 offices in New England. Andy has been the managing partner since January this year, having had 6 months to prepare. He has practiced trademark law since 1999, first as a trademark examining attorney for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, later as an intellectual property boutique, and now as a member of his firm's intellectual property practice group. Our final member of the panel is Sandro Iannicca. He is an industrial and organization psychologist and founder of SI Consulting, based in Ontario, Canada. Sandro has worked with leadership of a number of Big Four accounting firms and consulting firms and other industry sectors. SI Consulting is a firm specializing in leadership, assessment and development, and team effectiveness. Our moderator for today is Patrick McKenna. Patrick is an author, lecturer, strategist, and seasoned advisor to leaders of premier law firms. He's the author of 11 books. His most recent work, entitled Strategy, Innovation, Getting to the Future First, was published by Legal Business World. His books also include a 250-page ebook published in 2019, titled The Art of Leadership Succession. This can be downloaded for free at legalbusinessworld.com. That's legalbusinessworld.com. And I'm Larry Stroud. I'm acting as the host for today. I coach lawyers and accountants to help them become better business developers. Prior to establishing my advisory firm, Converge.com, spelled with a K, I held partner positions in 2 international accounting firms at various stages in my career. So at this point, I'm going to pass over to Patrick. And Patrick, you're going to handle the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you, Larry. And greetings to all of you. And thank you for joining us today. As we all know, this pandemic has kind of upended any notion of business as usual, such that some firms have even postponed any leadership succession to some predetermined, undetermined later date. As you've heard, we have with us today one firm leader who was elected last year and has gone through about 6 months of preparing to officially assume office at the beginning of this year, and another firm leader who's in the position of actually overseeing the transition of numerous office managing partners within both large and small offices. So let's start from hearing from each of them about how has this COVID situation had an impact? What specific lessons can be learned? Harry, can we start with you?
Yes, thanks, Patrick, and hello, everybody. It's certainly been an interesting, challenging year, unprecedented. I could tell you that we're really, I would say, have built a lot of infrastructure and governance around succession and just every day, the day-to-day manage of the firm. We didn't have a section on pandemic. So we basically had no playbook to follow. We threw it out first 90 days, probably 90 to 120 days. We just kind of froze everything. It was really just, how are we going to stand up, keep our people safe, get our client work done, try and figure out what the government was doing in terms of the regulatory process that it had a huge impact on how our clients would be serviced. And I think it took us, I would say not until July did I think we were in a position where we could say, oh, I think we know what that next normal is going to look like. I wouldn't say it's the new normal because it keeps changing. And I think we've been able to get back to, like, we had to postpone salary raises, even partner admissions, but everything just got pushed out. And I would say that 4 to 6 month window has been about our experience of how we took our firm into this next normal. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a color, Patrick, on how we responded. But I would say today we're back to following the protocol, but with new partner admission dates and new succession dates. Everything just got passed forward or put forward for that 4 month to 6 month period.
Now, as I understand too, Harry, from an earlier discussion we had, in your situation, you're actually selecting, are you not, the leaders of the various offices?
Yeah, I'll give just a bit of background on our governance, and it's changed. I was a small firm, and then I became a medium firm, and now I'm a larger medium firm. I've been doing this for 11 years. So it went from no governance, no infrastructure that was like written down. It was very much seat of your pants when we were 10 partners and 10 million in revenue. And today I'm going to confuse everybody. We switched from partners to owners. We have 53 owners, of which contribute 120 million. We were in one office, now we're in 4 offices. So we've become far more, I would say, professional in terms of management. And we moved away from being, voting me in to appointing me, my role by the board that we vote for. And then I have a lot of discretion to appoint individual officing managing partners and individual leaders who run the 3 businesses that we go to market. So that gives you a bit of a sense of, we went from, I would say, something that was very insecure to something that's far more formal.
Okay, I think we're going to come back to that. Andy, lessons. What has the learning like been for you with all of what's gone on?
I think Harry's probably speaks for all of us when he says we didn't have a playbook for this, and we were thrown into this almost on a almost overnight. One day it seemed like the pandemic was fairly far away, and the next day we were being told to pack up and go home, and didn't know when we'd be coming back. And we had started the process of trying to develop or choosing our next leader, and we were sort of in the middle of that when the pandemic hit. There was what I think we learned about our teams are that they were surprisingly resilient and able to do a lot more remotely than we initially thought. We were in the midst of doing the largest transaction in the firm's history, and we pulled that off relatively seamlessly, and largely because of people coming together. What we have learned in the time that's followed is that we're finding it harder and harder to maintain a cohesive team. I think there was a lot of pulling together during the initial parts of the crisis, and now we're trying to keep our people together, keep them feeling that they're part of a real enterprise and part of something larger than just a series of individual tasks.
Any learnings that came out of the cohesiveness? What kinds of things you've learned that might work, might not work?
I think people really value the informal check-ins. They don't always want them on Zoom. I think initially Zoom was this lifeline. Zoom and I'm a trademark lawyer and I'm using it in a generic sense. That's awful. The video links were this lifeline, right? So you could see people that you were used to seeing every day. As time has gone on, I think people are maybe a little tired of being put up in front of the video sometimes, but they really do want and appreciate the check-ins, the calls to see how they're doing. And that's what we're really trying to encourage our team leaders and our department chairs and me to continue doing, is just scheduling time with people, making sure that you're working with them, not just on individual tasks, but sort of more comprehensively or holistically.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Andy. Manuelle, Sandro, from your vantage point, how has COVID made certain aspects of succession planning either more challenging or perhaps even easier? Manuelle?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everybody. I totally agree. And I've seen what Harry and Andy describe, a lot of challenges related to the cohesiveness of the team, the transition. But I want to talk for a moment about the upside of some of the pandemic that I've also seen with some managing partners transitioning during the pandemic. And there were a couple of them that were very clear. One of them was just less politics around change in general. I think it's a lot harder to, do politics through Zoom and all these media. And the other one is just in general, less resistance to technology, digital acceleration. If you have, or at least in my case, I was coaching, managing partners who were really pushing very bold agendas. And I think it became evident that whatever they were pushing was necessary. So those were the upside of some of this very hard time.
Good point. Sandro?
Yeah, the piece I put on the table is when doing succession work, usually you need a target. You need to build some kind of leadership model, competency profile, and so on. This is what firm leadership looks like. Here's what we're expecting to do, office managing partner, and so on. So where the impact has been is around building those competency profiles. A lot of boards do it around the table. Now you're doing it virtually. It's a little more challenging. And the other challenge has been assessing people, because historically you could sit in front of somebody and read him or her and all that kind of stuff. Now it's all virtual. So consequently, it has put some challenges in front of us, but people have adapted pretty effectively. So those are probably the two things I would say I've noticed real change in terms of succession work in the last while.
And let me pick up a thread that kind of all of you have touched on. I mean, as you become a new firm leader, you see someone becoming a new firm leader. I would imagine one of the underneath challenges might be you don't know some of your partners. You don't know them that well. And without the physical contact, like, how do you go about building rapport? How do you go about finding out where they're at? Any best practices or whatever that any of you might be able to suggest? Andy, I think you talked at one point about having a session every Friday afternoon. Have I got that right?
Yeah. So our offices are in our four primary offices in Boston, Stamford, New Haven, and Hartford. And normally, as a managing partner, I would rotate, spend some time in each office. Since I can't do that at present, what I do is every Friday afternoon, I have a standing Zoom open house. It's the invitation goes to the partners of a particular office. So it's the analog is to me being sitting in a visitor office in that space, and then just telling them, drop by. Don't feel obligated, but if you have something you want to chat about, drop by, and I'll be there. The camera will be on for 3 hours, and I just kind of do my work, and then people pop in and out as sometimes very coordinated. Sometimes you see, 3 people joining at the same time because they want to talk about something specific. Other times it's just someone poking their head in and just because they're curious about what this is. But it's been really helpful. If not so much because people have been making use of it, but because people feel that there's an attempt to engage. And I think that optic of showing that you want to engage with people is extremely important at this time.
Super. Harry, Sandro, Manuelle, anything to add?
I agree. I'm not going to use, I will not plug Cisco WebEx. Oh, I just did. We use that as opposed to Zoom, but I think the technology has given us a new way to manage our time. And I would say the transition that I've had, one major leadership transition, probably went better. Getting, our geography is not, it's always a challenge. There's a lot of time traveling between Eastern and Western Canada. I feel that our requirement to be remote has facilitated more dialogue and a more familiarity with the teams. And our consulting group is really, like, I'm literally appointing the new consulting leader May 1st, but I feel he'll hit the ground running because he's been able to engage in ways that we could never have engaged under the prior. I'm not saying I want to stay remote, but I do want to embrace the technology. And that's been a huge learning for us, is how to use technology to help propel our business forward, and including engagement and knowledge and who are the people. And, I liked what I heard Andy doing, but there's all examples of how to get constant contact and how to use this opportunity. The screens are like a great way for me to see body language. I know who's interested in what I have to say, who's kind of checking their emails, and this is okay. Like, we're learning on a new way to communicate, but I find it a more effective way and a more efficient, less time on airplanes and less time just traveling. So this has been a very interesting learning, something we will take into the post-pandemic world.
And I hear you both saying kind of more disciplined in that you schedule it and it actually happens rather than wandering the hallways. Manuelle, Sandro, anything to add?
If I can jump in, I think I work also in like Silicon Valley and with other kinds of sectors, and they've been very creative with ways of keeping teams cohesive and building relationships. Some of them have, cocktail parties, Trader Joe's. We have Trader Joe's in the United States, favorites, all sorts of things to kind of have conversations that are personal conversations that would replicate the kinds of conversations that we would have at the water cooler or around a meal if we were getting together. So that's one thing I've seen. And the other one is just better conversations. In general, I think we've all realized that we have to make up for the lack of body language, the lack of cues that we might get through better conversations. And that's been a theme through the teams and the leaders I've worked with, is how do we have high quality conversations in a short amount of time that is constrained, but also has some possibilities that we didn't have before. We can poll people immediately, get immediate results, so using the technology in a hybrid model, I think, is where we're going.
Okay. Any other comments, Sandro, before we go to a poll with some questions?
I hope I haven't bucked the trend, but I've gone low tech. I've actually said to folks, who do you really need to see, and actually schedule that conversation, like actually go have a coffee and go for a walk. If it's allowed, obviously within parameters and so on, but you really pick and choose those key conversations, and they're more, as Manuelle said, informal. Let's just check in, but you value it so much more. I actually ended up meeting. It was actually a head of a legal firm who really wanted to chat. We ended up downtown Toronto at two separate ends of a bench in the middle of a courtyard having a chat. And it was valued. I mean, we just got a chance to actually see somebody. So I would also say you can still do that, but do it safely.
Good stuff.
Manage
expectations. We've got one.
Could I just pick up on? Yeah. Could I just pick up on something real quick that I thought of when Harry was speaking? I think that the technology platforms have given us the opportunity as leaders to share information with our teams much more evenly. So the advantage to walking the hallways is the personal side, right? You're present, you're engaged, but you are only seeing 2 or 3 people at a time at best. And that asymmetry of information has historically been a huge problem in law firm management. How you perceive the firm depends a lot on who's telling you what. By sharing information in kind of meeting environments where everybody can come in and everybody can get the same information at once, I think our flow of information is more even and more democratic. Everyone's getting the same stuff pushed to them. And so I think people have maybe a better sense of confidence about the information they're getting, that they're getting the same thing that their colleagues are getting.
Good points. Good points. We have one question from the audience. Just keep this in mind. I'll come back to it later. How do you measure success as a new managing partner? But before we go to that, let's go to the poll. We've got, Larry, 3 questions to pose to our audience. Question number 1, have you postponed any leadership succession activities as a result of COVID? Yes or no? And I would have said, a month ago that there would have been quite a bit, but recently there's been a lot more happening. So 90% no. Okay, we'll come back to that. Question number 2. What is adequate preparation time for a new firm leader to get ready to take the reins? And the third question in our series, did you receive any specific training to prepare for leading the firm? And survey says, most popular is coached by predecessor, someone, and others in the firm, 38%. Very interesting. Thank you. I was just saying to the panel that prior to this particular webinar, I actually had conducted back about 4 to 5 years ago a survey of 98 firm leaders, and adequate preparation time, 44% said nothing. We just kind of got together on Saturday, you got anointed for Monday, and off you went. And specific training, 56% at the time said no, it was pretty much sink or swim. So either things have changed or we have a different representation than the 98 firm leaders I talked to. But folks, what do you think? Any general comments from what you're seeing here? Anybody?
Well, I think things have changed, Patrick. I think, part of it's probably the technology, that the amount of information and best practices you can share, the amount of advisors to professional service organizations, the quality of the competition is forcing us to change. This is a survival of the fittest. Everything, like, none of us have a proprietary, product or service that we bring to the market. And ultimately, what worked in the past is not indicative of what's going to work in the future. I wouldn't do that to like I said, I was a sink or swim person, but I wouldn't do that to my next leader. I want them ready to hit the ground running. So I don't have a prescribed time frame. Our consulting leader, we job shadowed for 6 months. If my COO, who would step in and take over my role, if something were to happen to me unexpectedly, she would have to be ready the next day. So I want her fully available and fully aware of what those responsibilities are, so that she's ready to hit. And I think we've come a long way. That's just been our own journey and our own survival to keep us competitive.
Right. Any other thoughts from anybody?
Let me get in. I would hazard a guess. There's probably a correlation between firm size and preparation. So my guess is larger firms probably have a little more runway and a little more prep and training. Perhaps smaller firms maybe more under the gun to get folks up and running quickly.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I do think that sometimes I see a difference between sort of the penetration of the talent management approaches that come from the private sector into the professional services. And to all of your points, I think, Harry, what you're describing are really best practices in terms of, managing talent, creating talent pools, preparing people early, looking at succession not as an event, but as a way of growing leaders and transitioning leaders. And so size matters. And I think also whether you are in a legal field or not matters. My impression, again, from a very small sample, is that the legal field in general has been slower to adopt kind of best practices in the talent management space. And as I'm saying this, I'm sure there's thousands of exceptions, but in general, I think some other types of professional services are a little bit further ahead on that journey.
Andy, did you have a thought?
I think it depends in part on the infrastructure that's in place within the enterprise.
Yeah.
So, and that is, to Manuelle's point, something that law firms have been struggling with in terms of how much and how advanced the professional staff is. If you have a very highly developed professional staff with a lot of experience and qualifications, your new leader might need a little less runway to step in. If your new leader is going to have to manage a staff that is itself still learning, then that new leader might need more time because the responsibilities might be greater.
Good point. On a related question, I'd be curious to hear your comments, your thoughts on whether the candidate in the succession process is encouraged to confer with their largest clients. I will never forget an incident. It was a Dallas, Texas firm, 3 candidates. The one with kind of the leading candidate all of them were encouraged to go talk to their largest clients. He was in the IP area, went to his largest client, said, I am being considered to be the next managing partner of the firm. What do you think? The largest client said, think again. In other words, you got a choice. You can either continue to be there for me as my trusted advisor, or you can go lead the firm. And I wonder, is there something in the process where we air those kinds of things? Thoughts? Your observations, Harry?
Yeah, that made me laugh. Because I wouldn't want to ask my clients that question because clients are needy and they're going to look at their own self-interest. They're not stakeholders in my organization. They just contribute to our success. Having gone through this right now with the consulting leader, our approach is transition plans have to be both internal and external. So I would expect that when we come to a client, and we have some pretty marquee clients that our consulting leader serves, that we did engage them, but it wasn't a consulting as much as an informed with a transition plan. I would not, our success of our organization is putting our best people forward, and ultimately the stakeholders, the owners of this firm, our board, have made that decision. I've made that decision, and I'm sensitive to the client's ask and needs, but I also don't want to have any one client dictate the terms of how we manage our business. Okay. And we're fortunate we don't have clients that tip us over, but we're fully aware, and the challenges that I've gone through is, can we afford, I had many discussions at the board, can we afford to take this person offline and make them internal focused versus external? That's the tension that I still deal with. And it'll go back to your later question, what makes you successful, or how do you define success? But you have to have a lot of courage to take your top, let's say, performing by profit partner and bring them offline, or take them or reduce their client load. And that you're hoping that there's some kind of exponential result at the end, that they can train their team to be that much better, and our firm that much more successful. But I would not let an individual client dictate that term, but because I already know their answer.
Okay. Let's jump from that. How do you think we should measure success as a new managing partner? Any thoughts, criteria, anything you should be looking for? Anybody?
I can step in, but I'm happy to let someone else. So for me, it's all about, there's 2 things that I would say that I look for, and I continue to look for in leaders, especially those market leaders that in the different offices. I look at growth. Can we grow off of our base? And our culture. And culture is obviously a nebulous thing to measure, but it's something that I take very seriously. And I want our culture to be the winning culture in the marketplace. I want us to be the best firm to work for. I want people to feel inspired. I want our staff to recruit their friends and family members. So those are the 2 things that I look for success. And then, of course, to get it, because we're accountants, they're saying, well, how do you measure culture? And I don't. I actually bring in third parties to survey and let us know how our culture is. I don't want it to be anecdotal or, hey, I think we have great culture. We can look at metrics like turnover, but ultimately it's productivity and the general happiness of our people, and would they recruit people, and do they want to stay here and become future owners in our firm? And we're very sophisticated now. I wouldn't say 10 years ago I was quite sophisticated at it, but that's been a lot of time in our investment, because we think behavior and a great culture leads to great client service and profitability, which is an outcome of these
Good
two.
point. So not to miss your point here, you actually survey to get a sense of what the culture is.
Yes,
throughout the firm?
annually.
Yeah.
And it's
okay.
great. It's done third party, and no partners can participate in that survey. So
Right.
it's theoretically unbiased.
Measuring success, Andy, would you ask your partners what they might think success would be for you as a new managing partner?
Yeah. So I first we don't have a as I think is maybe typical of law firms our size, we don't have a job description for the managing partner, which in and of itself is a challenge. So I wrote one and asked my executive board to discuss it outside of my presence and refine it. And then I'm asking them to share it with the partners and get their input on it, so that there is some standard. The historically the managing partner position was left undefined for, I think, on purpose, so that each managing partner could shape it to their liking. I don't think that's a particularly a helpful approach, because as much as one person shapes it to their own liking, 40 people will shape it in such a way that they don't like what they're seeing. So that's a work in progress that I think will help build the institution a bit. But as far as what the partners I think are looking for in their managing partner and how they're evaluating, the first right or wrong is financial results. They're looking to make sure that the firm continues to do well financially, and then growth and culture go with that. Growth sometimes cuts against the financial gains. In that, I think a good managing partner, I've always viewed it, is someone who takes a longer view and is willing to take make some decisions now that might hurt profitability in the short run, because you're establishing longer term goals. And then culture is something that everyone talks about at the firm, and no one seems to be able to quite put a finger on what that is. I love the idea of surveying, getting a third party survey in. I'll be honest, Harry, I plan to nick that idea because I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And, for a firm to talk about its culture, I think it's really important that they have some sense of what that is.
And Harry, we want to know where you got the survey, but that's another question.
Well, part of it is going through culture, the third parties, organizations who measure culture, because I saw in the questions, like, how do you measure it? So I thought we're pretty, like, why don't we just speak to the people who run a culture award in Canada and get them, we'll put an application in, and then they came in and did the survey, and we won the award. But what we also did is we learned how to survey on culture. So it's like borrowing other people's great ideas. We use the third party organization that does this, and we've now adopted that, and we are going to continue to run that. But I think when someone said day to day, I can't wait a year to measure culture. Today, I think you measure culture almost daily. So we've created a scoring system, attributes in culture that we identify, like collaboration and caring, courage, a couple others, and we score them. And that scoring is on, like, it's not just like, is the person really good at their job and their P&L impact. It's how do they show up every day. So we have systemized it, and by doing that, you can now score even the partners. So even partners are being held accountable to that standard of culture, because they really do ultimately set the tone.
Let me pick up Andy's comment about job descriptions. Sandro, Manuelle, it chagrins me. I remember Bob Dell when he stepped down from being the leader at Latham's. And in a conversation with me, he said, my biggest shock was the fact that my partners did not know what I did, because they didn't have a job description. And my experience, my observations is very few law firms, multi-million-dollar operations, have a job description, other than what might be in the partnership agreement, which is so vague, forget it. Sandro, Manuelle, what are you seeing? What are your observations? What do you suggest?
I'll chime in. So demark two different things: job description versus a competency or job profile. They're actually two separate things. Most organizations have some form of job description, but the competency profile is really how you do your job. Here's the hard body of knowledge and skill. Here's the soft skills, leadership, managing folks, and so on and so forth. And usually you build that based on your future strategy. This is what we're expecting in the future. This is what we expect our individuals to do. Here's the differential scenarios he or she will find him or herself in. And here's the skills required. Here's the behaviors required in that new environment. And you build a model around that. And then you systematically assess against that. I'm going to flip it over to Manuelle because I know she got tons of experiences.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was perfectly said. I think maybe, Patrick, you're capturing two things. One of them is the role clarity. Like, why do we even have a CEO and why do we even have a managing partner? And that's kind of upstream from the job description. And then to Sandro's point, the competencies and then the critical success factors. How do we know that the activities that this managing partner is engaging in is really what's adding value to the firm based on what he or she was elected to accomplish? So I think there's a whole set of activities beyond the job description that are really critical, and they're high value for firms to think about. It's not just the end product of having the job description, but it's really the thinking that's also a high value activity in my experience.
One of the success factors that seems to be emerging more and more as I'm perceiving it is more of an accent on diversity and inclusion, and especially even in leadership. How are the leaders of our firm showing sensitivity to that? I'm aware of one firm that actually has a future female leaders network where they host monthly workshops to help prepare for leadership positions. But observations, is that something that's on the leadership agendas of most firms these days?
I think, Patrick, it ties into culture and putting your commitment to people. So we it wasn't just through the pandemic or the crazy events over the last couple of years. We had set up about 3 years ago these employee network groups, and they were themed. So some were based on gender, some were based on just being multicultural, some were based on ethnic backgrounds. It allowed us to deal with and have courageous conversations and get points of view that we didn't have to wait for the news. So we knew how our people were reacting to the unfortunate circumstances with George Floyd's murder. So we are African American Canadian. So we actually linked that group with our US firm just to create some critical mass. And it created such insight. And recently with the violence towards the Asian community, our Inspiration Employee Network Group are conducting with leadership these courageous conversations. So we've really integrated into our culture diversity and inclusion. And as Canadians, and I'll speak on behalf of Canada, we are diverse, just that's the facts on the ground, but we've not always been inclusive. So we have become far more deliberate and intentional within our firm. And I feel like if we can set the model, even though we're a small business in the relative big business, but I like that we made that a high priority, and that's setting the tone. And by the way, our clients are picking up on it. They understand that when we put out a proposal, we talk about our employee network groups, we talk about our commitment to diversity and inclusion, and we put money and time and effort and actions around it. And we don't have an answer, but we know we're part of the solution. It has to be that we're in it together.
Okay. Any other thoughts before? We haven't talked about it, but we kind of touched on it. Is it important to think about what's next for the outgoing leader, in the whole transition process, to kind of ensure that whoever the outgoing leader is, they continue to make a valuable contribution to the firm without any disruption and all the rest of it? And what's your experience? What have you observed? What have you done with respect to outgoing leaders as we transitioned in the new folks? Andy?
So this is an interesting issue for my firm, because I think maybe a little different to many U.S. firms. Our managing partners are a little young by comparison. So the managing partner my immediate predecessor is actually a year or two younger than I am. Her predecessor, after she ended her term as managing partner, and we're term limited to a maximum of 6 years, she ended up she returned to practice and then was appointed a judge. The two prior managing partners, one of them just retired this year, and the other is just approaching retirement. So there's a long period after they you end your term as managing partner where you're still in the firm, and so we dedicate budget for them to start rebuilding their practice and regrowing their practice. Their compensation is protected for a certain number of years, all in recognition of the service they gave to the firm and the fact that they went offline and during what really are typically your prime building years. Right. The hope is that because they know they're going to come back to practicing in the firm, they'll have a view towards making it a place that is healthy, 6 years from now. I have a vested interest in the firm, not just this year and next year, but 6, 8, 10 years from now, because I'm still presumably going to be here. But we do make them, we do give them budget to help them redevelop their practice and reinvigorate their practices. And then the extent to which they hold formal roles depends a lot on the specific individual, as well as the practice they're in. We've had managing partners leave the management role, but then become department chairs or practice group leaders just because they're really the best suited for it. We have others who just go deep back into being trial lawyers and want nothing more to do with management. So it's very much informal and adjusted to each person. But I have sort of convened informally this panel of former managing partners, since most of them are still around, to be my advisory board and fill in some institutional knowledge for me that I might not have.
And just so we understand, you're pretty much full-time, aren't you, as a managing partner?
Maybe 3/4 time, yeah.
3/4. Okay. Harry, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with curating a very specific role. So I was just thinking the head of my tax group, who transitioned prior to the pandemic, is now heads up our internal tax education. So it's just a way for him to continue to be meaningful to the firm, because he's a thought leader in tax. But we thought maybe he could educate our other tax leaders. So he does our internal tax training, and also helps us on very like when you hear high profile changes in tax law and what are the implications. So we kept him, because he's not been client facing for so long. We didn't want to then just say, hey, good luck. So we found a new role for him. The consulting leader just transitioned to a new role with our US affiliate. And so we now are promoting that person. I've not transitioned my role because I've been doing it for so long. So I'm not even sure what the plan is, but I do have ideas. Like, I want to sit on our international board, and I would start working on that when our board feels it's time. But we've talked about a 2-year unwinding process. So again, I do the same with our leaders, and I always speak to them in 2-year increments. Like, where are you 2 years from now? Where do you want to see yourself? And we try and curate them. I like what Andy's doing. I think I honestly don't want my ex-managing partners around me, but that's just from my own personal experience. I do want to keep my management team that has been really so helpful in us building out this vision around, if they want to serve in that role. But it has to be like both sides. They're still functioning and adding value, and they have a genuine interest and passion to be with us.
Manuelle, Sandro, recommendations for us?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in. I love the 2-year time frame. I think that's a very realistic time frame, and the way that we consider transitions when people are taking on new roles, I think there should be the same level of intention and support that goes into when leaders are stepping out of their roles and really helping them think and reinvent how they're going to add value to the firm, how they're going to transform. It is a profound transformation and often a bit traumatic, frankly, getting out of that role. And so it's an opportunity for people to really think whether they want to be in the firm, in what capacity they want to be in the firm. I was actually asked to create a program for a law firm many years ago just on these types of transitions to assist equity partners who are leaving. And it was very touching. And it's a very rewarding kind of thing to do to help people really figure out how they're going to add value. So kudos for doing it.
Sandro.
We haven't used the word, but mentorship. That's the simplest and easiest thing to say. I mean, these folks who have been in this role before can serve as mentors for the new office managing partner, even though Harry said sometimes you don't want them around, but you can be clear about, that role, because you don't have a lot of folks you can actually talk to about what you're going through. That individual who just moved off that role has probably experienced some of the same stuff and so on. And it's different from coaching. Coaching and mentorship are two totally different things. Mentors are someone you emulate. You want to be like him or her when you grow up. Coach can be anywhere. So consequently, the other thing I want to pick up on, which Harry talked about too, is planning for your retirement, because some folks, especially professionals, don't think long and hard about what's it going to be like post my years of contributing to all these organizations. And one of the roles that you can take on is coaching and mentoring. You can actually go back to the firm or other firms potentially and serve as a conduit to kick ideas around and help that individual grow.
Yeah, retirement. I heard a senior accounting partner say recently, "Don't ever use that word in my presence." Retire? Oh, no. Okay, let's try a couple more polling questions if we can, Larry. Question number 4. Have you initiated any formal efforts to identify the traits your firm wants in a leader and younger partners as future leadership candidates? And second question, is there any formal succession plan in place for determining your replacement as firm leader? Notice the word formal. Any formal succession plan in place for determining your replacement? So 38% actually have a couple of possible candidates, and 50% are, for the most part, no. Once again, folks, any general comments about what we're seeing here? Any surprises, thoughts?
I think, again, size matters.
Sure.
The bigger you are, the more infrastructure you can create or you can afford to create. We've got, like I said, when we were smaller, it was completely haphazard, and it was very much, I would say, just not really well thought of. And today, I think we spend a lot of time thinking of succession and spend a lot of time making sure that we're deep, like tax leader, audit leader, consulting leader, me, and there are redundancies that are built in that our size is allowed for it. So our management team is challenged to identify successors, because we can't control the marketplace. People can be recruited. We can't control, our environment, the health issues that we have, and we just want to be prepared more so than ever before, and cultivate that next generation of leadership. So we're being very deliberate. So if you're in our firm and you're in our Executive Leadership Academy, you're being thought of as a future leader. And if you're in our Eminence program, then you're a young person that we're thinking of you as future owners. We start that journey pretty well from the day we recruit people and get them on a path so that they always know where they are. And we constantly want to continue to grow and make sure succession is just another thing we do well. So that's been my journey.
Yeah, on that note, and just to build on that, and it's to everybody, how do you guard against an individual who either chooses at one end of the extreme, mini me, because I want somebody just like me, irrespective of whatever they can do, or at the other end of the extreme, somebody who is not going to do as well as me, because then I will look so much better after they've taken the position. And anybody thinks that doesn't happen lives in a different planet. But thoughts, like how do you protect against that?
One way, Patrick, is just don't let me make that decision on my own.
Okay.
So I'm accountable to my board. I can make a recommendation, but ultimately I do not decide who the next managing partner is in my firm. I may decide who's the next managing partner of an office, but not for me. So I cannot make that decision. And that gives me comfort that that the firm will be able to look at, remove some of the bias. Because of course we're naturally biased to say, yeah, I want, like, it could be, if we're not confident, then yeah, I want to make sure the next person fails, which seems a bit counterintuitive. But I think that's the key for me, has been that it's not going to be me alone making that decision.
Other thoughts from anybody? Have you seen this, what I'm talking about, happen? Is there a way to make sure that that doesn't occur?
I think that maybe one factor, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One factor is there any strategic alignment? Because if there is a business strategy and a growth strategy, then it becomes clearer of what the profile is that's going to be able to fulfill this and deliver on that mandate. And the other thing is just the use of science. Just like you guys use, brain science for informing the work that you do, there's actually a whole world of scientific, well-established practices that really assist in the selection and the development of processes, and they're very high performing, and they can help, again, enhance the decision-making process.
Good points. Andy, you had something to?
Yeah, so much like Harry, we'll have a nominating committee, and I will not pick my successor. I will be part of the nominating committee, but the other executive board members who form the committee will interview each of the partners. I will not. So the other 4 members of the committee will interview all the partners at that time, a year and a half before the selection needs to be made, to discuss potential candidates, and then candidates will put their names forward, and we will vet candidates of our own selection, but it's not my choice. The other thing is, to the extent I will have some influence in the decision. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I have a long horizon after my term ends, so I will have some incentive to make sure that, or to guard against trying to select someone who won't do as well as me. I will want someone who can lead the firm well, because my well-being will depend in part on that.
Good point. Good point. Maybe one last point before we kind of come to a final polling question. I thought this entire subject matter was driven by COVID and a reluctance we felt that might be there in terms of choosing a leader. Obviously, our participants don't experience that reluctance. But this morning, I'm reading about a survey. 4,200 American Bar Association, forgive me, Harry, members. I think this is true across the professions. Significant number of professionals who are feeling more overwhelmed today than they did even a year ago, called pandemic stress. Overwhelmed with to-dos, overwhelmed because they feel disengaged from their firms, especially women with children, and harder to keep home and work life separate. Any final thoughts from a leader's perspective? How are we handling this? Are we giving it enough attention? Are we just pretending it doesn't exist?
Well, you can't pretend it doesn't exist, because you'll see it. We've had people literally come and resign and basically say, I'm not going anywhere. I just can't take it anymore. That kind of early conversation, like that early experience throughout the year, got us very concerned that we were now in areas that were unprecedented, the burnout, the mental health challenges. And we went outside the organization. We brought in psychologists, we brought in others. We had Jennifer Moss, who's a Canadian, speak to our North American team. She had written an article on managing exhausted leaders who are managing exhausted workforces. I highly recommend reading her article in Harvard Business Review. But we were so stricken by her comments that we just had her come speak to our leaders. So we had all of our partners in Canada and the US attend a session that she ran. I've never seen more tension in my 10 or 11 years in practicing as a leader put on mental health. Our commitment to it, our energy and efforts to recognize it, and our leaders are not trained for this. So we have not I've collaborated with my daughter, who I gave a shout out to earlier. If you follow me on LinkedIn, we do a mental health minute once a week, and we put it out in an infographic, and we share it. I share it externally because this is like for all of us, all professional service organizations, sure in general, but especially what's going on with the workday never ends, the deadlines never seem to end. The government does not do us favors by extending deadlines because we never know when the work stops. And we have to get back to what was like a predictable work time frame and environment and expectations. And how we're going to manage through this has been probably my greatest challenge this year as a leader.
Well said, Harry. Any other comments before we kind of bring this to a close?
One of my friends, I think, put it really well. Working at home is really living at work.
Yeah.
And that stress is something that a lot of people are feeling. And as leaders, to Harry's point, we can't ignore it. We're not trained to deal with it. I think, it's a phenomenal idea bringing in some outside help. But we are, we're trying to keep our team leaders aware of this issue and trying to, check in on people as people, not just on tasks.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in one-on-one coaching and firm leaders, practice group leaders, and so forth, taking the time to schedule one-on-one sessions with the people in their groups and trying to at least be sensitive to what's going on. Larry, let's do the last of our polling questions. This is the easiest question. When you look out at the challenges facing firms in the future, what skills and attributes do you feel the next generation of firm leaders need? Larry, let me turn it back to you. Let me thank the panelists for participating. And boy, we could have spent another hour on this, I'm sure.
We could have. Thank you, Patrick. Harry, could you repeat the name of the person that came to speak to your partners that you engaged?
Yes, her name is Jennifer Moss. And she wrote, I think it was in January or February, in the Harvard Business Review. And by the way, she's going to be doing a return engagement. It was really interesting how the partners reacted, and they never react well because we're always interrupting them from their day-to-day job, but right. It's become such a critical issue. She's, I don't know where she lives now. She was based here out of Southern Ontario, but she does most of her work now, I believe, in the US.
Excellent. And just to let the panel and audience know, I've been following Harry's mental health minutes, which he's been posting on his LinkedIn, which are wonderful. So thank you for that. Today was a great session, so thank you very much. We heard various aspects and thoughts on succession in professional services firms. My thanks to Harry, Manuelle, Andrew, and Sandro. And thank you to our moderator, Patrick McKenna. Managing Partners Forum was initially formed in the UK in 1995. The membership comprises leaders in law, accountancy, consulting, and other professional services firms to share their experiences and ideas to enhance excellence in the professional service firm leadership. It is now in North America. We are posting a video of today's webinar on the forum's website at mpfglobal.com in about 10 days' time, and it will also be on YouTube. You will be emailed with the direct link, so you can have a look at it or share that the video with members in your firm. The next Managing Partners, the next Managing Partners North American webinar will be in May, and we will send you details in due course. So my thank you again to everyone. It was a great session, and have a great balance to your day.